this there. It would help if I had unmuted everything, right? Here we're good. We're good. Houston, we got liftoff. Anyway, yes, hi everybody. Now that I muted the microphone, that usually helps. We're back. It's Halloween. Like I said before, since it's a Monday, we're hoping everybody recovered from any partying that they did this weekend for Halloween, because in the last couple of years, forget it, partying and all that other stuff was kind of like not really good, even if you were in Florida, but that's over. So everybody's going out and having a good time. Anyway, guys, I thought, what I started thinking about Halloween. All right. And we started thinking about Halloween, and we were thinking, man, when we were kids or young or teenagers, Halloween was a blast. Obviously different things. Yeah. Every once in a while you heard about different or weird or bad things that happen, but overall, I think it's become so complicated nowadays with Halloween. There's no trick-or-treaters hardly ever. We live in a rural area, which I know it's different, but even before we lived in a rural area, you wouldn't have as many trick-or-treaters. Before it was a blast. You would see kids going out there, and then it was like 10 o'clock and they'd be still knocking on your door trying to get candy, remember? And I myself, we remember even into teenage years, Halloween was the best. You had a lot of fun. Forget even the candy.
New York was fun.
New York. So I was thinking, what happened? That Halloween, instead of being a great time to dress up and hang out with your friends when you got older, or just going, kids, like everybody was trying to get the great candy because nobody wanted to get the bad candy. Everything went south. But anyway, we decided we were doing a hot tub time moment into the past, into the 70s and 80s. And I said, you know what? Let me not, how everything, when you look back, everything is just, it was wonderful. It was great. And then I think, well, you know what? Even back then, they had weird stuff that was going on. One of them being the satanic panic and some of the stuff. And I said, you know what? Let me look into this. Let me look into what was going on. And I found some really interesting stuff, because, you always hear about these things with the satanic panic, like somebody was promoting why, people running around. Besides, in the early 1970s was when Rosemary's Baby came out and all that, The Omen and The Exorcist. I said, you know what? Let me see what is the history, because everybody knows about Halloween, and jack-o'-lanterns and blah, blah, blah. And what I decided to do was, let me give you, first of all, a little bit of history, real quick history about really what the roots of Halloween are, and why in some cases there was what's the word I'm looking for? You would say, well, okay, you know what? There was a push as to the sacrifice and whether it was called Satanism or whatever, why that would be a significant holiday versus any other date. Okay. So let me go ahead and read you real quick a little bit about the history of Halloween. Okay. And it makes you understand a little bit better what was, when some of these people that they do these weird things around Halloween, why they would tie that in. Now, Halloween originated usually from a civilization dominated Northern Europe. These were the Celts. They lived in Central Europe, moved westward. This was before the Romans arrived there. And by the way, they had no written language. Everything there was oral tradition. All right. Now, the Iron Age is called the Age of the Celt in Britain. And eventually, Julius Caesar, he ended up conquering and arriving in Britain. And as a matter of fact, they were known, the Celts were known to rush into battle armed and naked. All right. And their favorite spoil of war was the severed head of a foe. These people were very combative, to say the least. Now, they worship deities personified by the force of nature. They routinely sacrificed them to appease them. And when Julius Caesar, he wrote a story about, when he was fighting throughout all these different, basically conquering, he wrote something called The Conquest of Gaul. And he described that human sacrifice using fire was common among the Celts. Now, these activities, they were overseen by what was called the Druids, and I'm sure you've heard of them. And among the Celts, they were considered prophets, bards, priests, and of course, they were all male. And women could assist, but as far as Uh, the Druids, they were male, and their leader was the Arch or the Archdruid. Now, besides religious leaders, they were the judges at all disputes, and because of their status in society, they were exempt from taxes and military service. Nice touch there, Druids. Now, there were two important dates under Druidic calendar. This was May 1st, known as Beltane, and October 31st, and November 1st, known as Samhain or Samhain. And it was dedicated to the Celtic Lord of the Dead. Right? This was in that tradition. This is when one year became the other. In other words, you know how we do the let's go from the New Year's Eve. This was the New Year's Eve, and of course, this was tied into harvesting, and the winter was coming, so it's understandable why they would see this as the end of the year. Now, during this time, they would invite the spirit of their deceased relatives to join the celebration. This is something similar to ancestor worship. And this included taking the skulls of the family members from the grave, decorating them, and bringing them into the festivities. In other words, hey, come on in. And milk or food was left outside the home for wandering spirits who had no family, because there was a danger if a spirit was left out of the fun, they were thought to be unpleasant. In other words, not everybody that died had a family to bring them. In other words, to include them. Now, since winter was on the horizon, bonfires were used in ceremonies. Now, according to Caesar, ritual sacrifices of animals, especially horses and humans, were made in the flames. And he described also that they would use people suffering from serious diseases, such as were like if you prisoners, or if you, in other words, for lack of a better word, if you were a burden on society there, you kind of could end up being a sacrifice. And some of the tribes had what they call colossal images made of wicker work. And the limbs were filled with living men. And then they were set on fire, and the victims burned to death. And sometimes captured Roman soldiers were part of the sacrifice. Now, afterwards, the remains were studied by the Druids to predict the future, especially for the upcoming year. Now, the Druids might have been mystical, but they had an opportunity also to line their own pockets, because they would lead a parade of masked peasants to go door to door and gather gifts for the Druid god Muk Allah. And the tribute was demanded. Otherwise, the peasant could be punished. It could come in the form of stolen livestock or burning down farm buildings. Now, this predated mafia shakedowns for supposed protection, because basically this is what they were doing. Either you give to Muk Allah, or guess what? Oh, your cows were stolen, that kind of deal. Now, the Celts were distrustful also of fairies, who were considered evil. So, this idea that you see of Tinkerbell and all that cute stuff, the Celts, they were very distrustful of fairies, because the fairies had a complaint against humans, because they thought the humans had displaced them from the land. And they were believed to live in what they call mounds or barrows that dot the British Isles. Now, so it was not only during Samhain or Samhain, it was the spirits of the dead that caused mischief to fairies. And fairies, of course, got food and milk left outside the house. Now, the Romans, eventually, they blended their customs with those of the Celts, and they had their own festival honoring the dead called Feralia, which was celebrated at the end of October. And even though the Romans were pretty tolerant of other religious beliefs, they clashed with the Druid practice of human sacrifice. And since the Druids, once they got rid of the Druids, since they had oral traditions, once the priests disappeared, the religion faded. And Christians did something similar. As Europe became Christianized, they kind of like integrated, took over old images, old holidays. Now, the Cathedral of Our Lady of Chartres, it's about 50 miles southwest of Paris, which was constructed in the 13th century. But this was the last version that was built on the site of at least 5 cathedrals built since the 4th century. And originally, it was a Celtic sanctuary who had been taken over from an earlier pagan site of worship. Now, the Druids, prior to it becoming a cathedral, had venerated a pregnant goddess statue that was brought there from a non-Druidic sect. In other words, even the people that were there that were pre-Druids at that location this was considered some type of holy place. Now, this pregnant Venus figure was transfigured when it was Christianized into the pregnant Virgin Mary and venerated at the cathedral until the French Revolution, when fanatics destroyed one of the oldest continuously venerated shrines, figurines in history. It was rebuilt in the slides. If you're if you're seeing the video version of this, you're going to see what that version looks like. Now, most of what we now know in the United States was developed in Europe during the Dark Ages. About 1000 AD was when they started doing that All Souls Day, which is celebrated November 2nd, which has become All Hallows Tide. And Christians would dress all in black and go door to door asking for food for the dead. And this evolved into children exchanging prayers for the dead in exchange for soul cakes. All right. This started in the 11th century in a tradition called souling. And these soul cakes were sweet with a cross on the top, and they were intended to represent a spirit being freed from purgatory when eaten. Remember, prior to this, when, the Christianity, it was heaven, hell, and purgatory. Now, the Puritans during the 1600s, they banned Halloween, not because it was connected to witchcraft, but because they claimed it was a Catholic holiday. Now, when Ireland was hit by the potato famine in the 1800s, and Irish immigrants fled to the United States, they brought their own Halloween traditions with them. And the name trick or treat was first used in America in 1929. And then that term jack-o'-lantern is believed to have come from a folk story of something called Stingy Jack, or also known as Jack Smith, Drunk Jack, or Flaky Jack. This originated in Ireland. I had never heard of this. And Jack was known as a sneaky drunk with a silver tongue. One night, he's wandering through the countryside when he finds a body with a grimace on its face. Jack soon realizes he's come upon the devil himself on the cobblestone path, who had come to collect his sinful soul. He asked to drink ale before his trip to hell, and Satan took him to a pub and ordered all he wanted. When it came time to pay, Jack didn't have money, so he asked Satan to turn himself into a silver coin in order to satisfy the bartender. All right, hold on a minute. And let's say, so Jack, who had no plans to visit the hot place, took the Satan coin and stuck it in his pocket along with a crucifix. Jack made a deal with the devil that he would allow him to turn back in exchange for 10 more years. The years sped by and Satan came back for Jack's soul. This time, Jack asked if he could have one apple to eat. This time, when the devil climbed an apple tree, Jack surrounded it with crucifixes. This time, Jack bargained that he would never take his soul to hell. Jack grew old, and his last day on earth arrived when he met St. Peter at the pearly gates. He was turned away because of his sinful life. When he went to hell, Satan reminded him he couldn't take his soul. He gave Jack an ember inside a hollowed turnip to light his way, and he is doomed to roam the middle plane between good and evil. And that's the story of Jack-o'-lantern. Believe it or not, I had never heard. I knew what the Jack-o'-lantern was. I had never heard of it. But anyway, this is a very well-known tradition, that we see now a lot of times. And you know what? Before we go any further, I was telling Henry, because Halloween, we're talking about ghost stories, and tell him about your first sighting as a ghost, because people ask us, when did you see a ghost? And this is something that happened to him as a kid.
Well, my grandparents originally came from Spain, and they ended up in Cuba. My parents were born in Cuba. I used to go to my grandparents' house to spend the weekend from Friday to Sunday until I go back to school. And I was like 6, 7 years old, and they used to let me wander anywhere I wanted to. Back then, kids didn't have to worry about getting taken or anything like that, because everybody there took care of everybody else's kids. So my grandparents had an old colonial house. There was that they built when they came from Spain, with cobblestone and the crown moldings, like it looked like a miniature version of like a little castle. And they made a courtyard, because I was the baby of the house. They made a courtyard, and they had goats and chickens for me to play with. And they had a ravine that went all the way into the river. So we would play there with the goats and stuff in the river. So I would stay outside. They would go to sleep, and I would be outside wandering around and messing around with their parrots and stuff till like all hours of the night. And they ended up telling me, they go, well, my name in Spanish is Enrique. They call me Enriquito. They go, we're going to sleep. Don't do anything. Don't do anything crazy. You know I was gonna do something crazy. So I went outside and I was gonna go mess around with the parrot. So I'm walking around the hallway. It's like an open hallway.
Like a breezeway?
Yeah. With a whole bunch of crown moldings and stuff. And they had this 30-year-old parrot. They curse and said all kind of cool stuff. And I was messing around with the parrot. There were these bats, no lie, about like this big, hanging on the side. And I screamed and I went to run away. But when I looked, I saw something in the courtyard by my grandparents' coconut tree and palm trees. And it was like a lady in like what looked like, now I will realize that it's like the 16th century or something like that, and all dressed in lace and stuff, like grayish white skin. And I screamed, pardon my French, like a little bitch, and I ran down the hallway, and I woke up my grandparents and everything, and they thought I was asleep. And then my grandmother sat me down and told me that before they actually built the house and did everything there, because my grandparents went to Cuba in the 1900s. They said before that belonged to this old family. They came from Spain, and the lady died there, but they didn't know where she was buried. Otherwise, they would have dug her up and threw her in the river or something.
No, they wouldn't have done that. I'm guessing that they did, even though I'm you know what, the only thing that maybe it was an old Catholic cemetery that nobody knew about because
they said that the family, that she was the only one that was buried there. But because then after that, my grandfather was getting like weirded out and started looking everywhere. And then he had some of his workers like started digging up the whole courtyard and everything else. And they found the old lady's bones there. And then they gave her a proper burial someplace else. Who the heck knows where? But they buried her someplace else. And they had spiritualists come there, and they did like a ceremony or something there, and nothing ever happened after that. But Henry never walked down that hallway again.
You know, the reason why I was saying that is that a lot of these places were, you know, whether it was Cuba or the United States, where people lived like in a rural area, what they would do is the family sometimes would have like a little chapel, what they call a chapel of ease. It wasn't like a cathedral, it was like a little church with a little graveyard. And sometimes it was consecrated where they would allow like the family members to be buried, because sometimes like if the town was a little bit further away or the regular cemetery, you know, in other words, because back then, remember, whether you were Catholic or any type of religion, Christian, there was a big deal about being buried in consecrated ground. All right. That, as a matter of fact, they made such a big deal that if you were, that's why that you had that tradition that if you were a suicide or something unsavory, they didn't want you weren't allowed to be buried inside the cemetery. Or like if you were like a kind of an immoral person, they didn't want you to be buried in the cemetery either, because even the afterlife. So I was thinking maybe they'd had a little chapel back when the Spaniards were around in that area, and
they had the equivalent of like maybe 15 acres, 20 acres.
Yeah, they might have been part of a bigger thing.
And like the back of it was like plantain fields, and then the whole thing just like a ravine. It just went down into like one of the biggest rivers.
Or
in the thing, it was all full palm trees and everything.
Let's go down.
Very cool looking.
Let's go down the rabbit hole. You know, what if the reason why she was seeing her ghost after, like you said, she looked like she was an old time whatever, was maybe they had done away with her and they buried her in a place she wasn't supposed to be buried. Okay, because everybody hears ghost stories about ghosts that are, once they're laid to rest, their bones are laid to rest.
Okay,
where they're supposed to be, the haunting stops.
Okay, don't blame it on the old man. The old man got there in 1900s, not 1600s.
Well, that's what I'm saying. No, but that's what I'm saying. Who knows what might have been there before. Things were people, hey, it's like, oops, they did away with so and so. Let's take her out back there and just bury her. Like,
I asked my mom much later on, and she said that for what the old people said, that there were only like maybe 3 or 4 families that lived there, and they came like in the 1500s, 1600s,
right?
and they pretty much dominated our whole entire area.
Yeah, of course. Because what was it? Your family, what is it? They had an ice factory, right?
They had an ice factory, and in Spain they had vineyards.
But over here, what they did was, which I thought was cool, because we never think about it, was they would distribute
They
ice.
found the opportunity. They nobody had actual refrigerators, so the way they kept the refrigerators cold was with big, huge ice bricks, and they just stuck it in the top and in the bottom, and the ice rose and dropped, and it kept everything cold.
All right, and that's what your family did for a living over there.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, who knows what was there 100-200 years before? So yeah, that's the first ghost story that we had, which he had told me a long time ago, and we were talking about it, and that's what you get. See, there was, because back then, a lot of the construction, especially in Cuba and in tropical climates, is where you have these open breezeways and courtyards between buildings, because you want the airflow. Remember, there's no air conditioning back in these times. So they're letting him run around thinking nothing's going to happen to him, because he's in that breezeway area, even though I don't think they were happy that were running around.
And what was very wonderful back then, like his workers, he built them a house across the way.
Right.
So the only ones that owned our whole area were my grandparents. And then on top of the mountain was the other family, and that's it. So you could run around, do whatever you wanted to. There's nobody going to make it into that property without them knowing it.
Right. And it was a different thing, but there you go. That's our first. Now, I started looking, like I said, I was going to do a throwback into weird true crime and around Halloween and everything. And I stumbled on this one, okay, which did occur in October. And really, in reality, I don't know there's a significance to it. But I'm going to tell you about it because it was really unusual, so much so that I wanted to include it in this. And we're going to go back to 1969. This is October of 1969. And the husband or the father, whatever, his name was Leonard Carl Humphrey, and he was 35 years old, and he wanted to be more of an Indian than he was. Now, according to a friend of his, a guy named Larry Wickham, who was a policeman later on, but once upon a time had been his business partner, he said that Leonard was maybe an 1/8 Apache, but he often tried to pass himself off as full-blooded. He was very proud of his Indian blood. However, with Humphrey, his pride turned into an obsession, especially with an Apache sun god named Santos, which in Spanish translates to saint. And by the way, I tried to look up to see if there is such an Apache sun god named Santos. I couldn't find any reference to it, but I don't know. Maybe there is. I tried. I couldn't, not as far as a sun god, but a sun god named Santos. Now, Humphrey, before all of this happened, he used to work for the Lorain County Sewer. This is in Ohio, and he and his wife, which was 30 years old, and their 3 kids, they were found shot to death on a single bed in their trailer. And police later believed that this was a murder-suicide. Now, inside, they found an elaborate note describing that the family was going to the land of Santos, the Apache sun god, because there was so much sin in the world. Right now, this is like, you think of the Jim Jones when he took everybody off to Guyana and he poisoned everybody, and you're thinking, is this the way this is going? But there's other twist to it that at the end makes you think, really, what was the motivation for this horrible act? Now, the positioning of the bodies, police determined that Laurel Humphrey, the mom, was the one that shot each of the kids with a .22 caliber rifle, then shot her husband at the base of the skull and then herself in her mouth. Their kids were Leonard 8, John 7, and Shane 6, and they were wearing their pajamas. And now, supposedly, the children knew what was going to happen and were looking forward to seeing Santos. Police said, based on the information found at the crime scene, and he was only dressed in his jeans. I don't know about that part about the kids thinking that they were going to get killed. And I'll tell you why. The note also gave instructions for the funeral, and their burial clothes were laid out, and that they wanted a certain note to be buried in their wolf tooth necklaces. All right. Now, again, this is it makes you think that there is something, first of all, you're thinking, okay, this is a situation where, did these people know what they were getting into as far as the kids? But you'll see what I mean, that there seems to be more to this than what appears to be at the beginning. So here we go. Now the police come, of course, and they're interviewing all the people because they lived in this trailer park, and from what they said, it like early on Monday morning, the party breaks up, and the Tucson police say that 4 persons who went to the party witnessed the note in which Humphrey tried to explain the deaths. And one girl, I don't get this, of course, there's always a weirdo in every group. She signed it, believed that Humphrey was serious, and she thought it was beautiful. The other people, and also they left the will. And then the witnesses said that they didn't believe that the couple would carry out the plan. I don't understand why. You would think that with as much detail, you would think that this guy's going to do it, or at least out of concern for the children. But obviously, nobody did anything. And then one of them, a guy named Robert Shelton, who was 26, he was the one that found the family the next day. Now, this is what the note read. The clothes we wish to be buried in are in the back bedroom. Also, we wish to wear our wolf tooth necklaces. We do what we wish to do. Do not wipe the dust off my boots, as it is the dust of the land I love. To many, we may be fools for what we do, but remember, it is you who will be wet in the rain, made cold by the winter's wind, and be baked when the sun is full in the summer. For us, it is not but the silence of the grave. For you, there is more in the struggle to survive. For us, there is but peace. I wonder who is really the fool. And both parents signed the note. And it's like very like, now it was a 1-page note. It was handwritten by Leonard. And he blamed also the war in Vietnam and the turmoil in the world for the deaths. And it's like everything except that they were nuts. And he said everyone was doing their own thing, and this was their thing. Now, prior to this thing happening, the last 4 years of Humphrey's life was full of hard drinking, love of animals, and immersion in the Indian lore. So in other words, something happened to him. And again, that guy Wickham, who was a friend of his when he was in Ohio, he had gone into a business with him. Now, this other guy, Wickham, who later on became a policeman, he was also 1/8 Indian. And they became partners and started something called the Diamond W Wildlife Reservation on a farm. But during that time that they were together, the 1 year that they were doing the business, they taught each other Cherokee and Apache languages, studied animals, collected Indian artifacts. But what happens is Humphrey or Carl or Leonard or whatever, he's diagnosed with MS, with multiple sclerosis. He falls into a depression, starts drinking heavy. And in 1966, he's full of debt, and he left his home in Ohio. In other words, this guy was living in Ohio, had a job, probably a county or city job in a sanitation plant, leaves his work. By then, he's got 3 kids, decides he's going to do this. I don't know what type of business they were trying to go into. After a year, it goes belly up, and he just books it out of Ohio. And what he tells his friend Wickham is he's going to head west to trap animals for wildlife preserves. So he rents a 50-foot trailer and he heads out west. And they said that besides his wife and the kids, he took 2 Siberian wolves, an albino raccoon, a rare ferret, a monkey, a Great Dane, and several reptiles. And Wickham, that friend of him, says he never heard from him again. He only heard from them was after the fact, when this whole thing of the murder-suicide took place. Now, the police said the kids had attended at least 4 different schools since they arrived in Arizona in 1966, because the family moved around a lot. And that the last school that they attended, which was Nash Elementary, said that all the 3 kids were excited and happy at their forthcoming trip. Now, I don't understand if maybe their parents are telling them, we're going to go see Santos or we're going to do this. I find it doubtful that these kids are being told that they're going to get killed, that they're going to get shot. I doubt that somehow, because I would have thought that if even at that age, these kids would have had some type of sense of self-preservation, or they might have said to their teachers, oh, we're going to go see with Santos after mommy or daddy kills us. Somehow I think they of course, like they lied to these kids, their own children. Now the family lived at 502 West Laguna, which is a trailer park. It's still a trailer park. Now the neighbor said that the living room of their trailer was decorated with stuffed lizards and snakes, along with Indian masks with snakes and serpents coming out of the mouth. And several of the neighbors, who called Humphrey Apache Carl, he wanted everybody to call him Apache Carl, thought that he practiced a form of voodoo and that he at times made wishes and then kissed an Indian mask. So what is this guy doing? Now, the week before the murders, the Humphreys are charged with 3 counts of contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Several neighbors charged the couple were trying to engage their children in a prostitution ring. In other words, it sounds like the 3 counts were done in connection to each of their children. There was a count for each child. Now, according to this guy Wickham, who knew him from before, his wife, she was more tolerant and really interested in his passion for Indian ritual. So I always wonder, how did he get her to buy into this? Okay, including, I want you to kill the kids, kill me, and then kill yourself. I still don't understand that part. God knows. Now, what was the real motive for why these parents decided to end their lives and those of their children? Was it truly a belief in an Apache deity or some type of religious belief that went wrong? Was it a combination of alcoholism and Humphrey's diagnosis of multiple sclerosis? Yet, how does one explain that his wife agreed to killing their children and was the one to actually shoot all of them? And was there any truth to what the neighbors claimed, that the parents were involved in prostituting their kids? And you have to ask yourself, what dark shadow fell across this family? What happened that what sounds like middle, average life in Ohio all of a sudden ends up so horribly wrong? And even though this didn't really have any traditional satanic overtones, I don't know if the timing of this in October had anything to do with it, even though it was end of September, October, if there was something happening. I don't know if really it had to do with them being arrested or charged with that involvement with prostituting their kids. Was it debt? Nobody knows really what's going on. And I'm thinking to myself, how desperately you're hoping that they were so desperate for money that they were willing to prostitute their kids. It was very dark, or how did he morph into, this basically worship of, I think it's some type of deity really that he made up, and he's like all caught up, obviously, in being more than what he was when he was only 1/8 Apache. He wanted to be full blood. There was something going on in this guy's head. And again, I come back to it. I can't understand how his wife bought into this. What do you think, Henry?
Either one or two things. Either I'll put on my ex-cop hat.
Go ahead.
Either one or two things. Either they found out, that people found out what they were doing, and that they were both of them they were going to get their perverted, sick ass into jail, and they decided to actually kill themselves and kill the kids to avoid going to prison.
I'm surprised that the kids weren't taken away from them right then and there. Like child services didn't step in and say.
And the people around that park were going along.
They were kind of nutty themselves.
We're going along with doing that stuff to those kids. Of course, they're not going to throw them under the bus because they were part of it. So they're going to protect them and not call DIFAS or DCF, whatever it is in that state. So no. I'm just saying that I'm surprised that once they got arrested, somebody must have said something. We don't know what the origins is. Or maybe somebody there took care of the kids when they got arrested and didn't throw them under the bus.
Okay, but if well, no. If they're getting arrested and they're contributing to the delinquency of a minor, those 3 counts, I'm assuming that it was tied
See,
to
but
their
that's
3
them.
kids.
That's them. That's not the people in that park.
No,
So
but I'm
they're gonna.
saying that I'm surprised that they didn't take the kids out. Like
Oh,
if your parent, if they're
maybe
thinking,
somebody there say, "Look, we'll watch the kids until."
because at this point you're thinking, hey, I don't know. It just, to me, it seems like, to me, it would seem that somebody would have stepped in, and I don't understand. Again, the and that thing about one of the neighbors reads the suicide note, says, "Oh, it's so beautiful." It's like, what
See what I mean? Unfortunately, who knows what's in the mind of one of these sick people?
Well, you're right. You're right. I agree. But then the other part is,
And if those people are cuckoo,
yeah, that's usually what it comes right down to. Who's cuckoo cuckoo? Yeah. So yeah, there's one of those, and I had to, I started thinking, what, this has to do with more the even though it wasn't, there was something, like I said, I don't know, it was a mental illness, or was this guy taken over? Did he open a I was telling Henry, because Henry's like, I go, maybe this guy, with some of this weird worship that he was doing, opened some type of portal which allowed this darkness where you're killing your kids and the wife. It's like, that's another one.
or if he said he indirectly didn't really want that life, and it was just dropped on him, and he figured that would be an easy way out.
Okay, that's not an easy way out. Well, anyway, but okay, let's get on to your ghost story. Let's go. Let's do a hot tub time moment.
Which one?
The
hospital one?
Yeah, let's do the hospital, because I think this is a really good story.
Okay. Which one? The mortuary or the other one?
Well, start with the beginning, how you ended up there to begin with, but
okay.
don't get graphic,
because when I was 15 years old, well, way before that, my mom, since she had to work because my dad died as soon as we came from Cuba, she figured that a way for me to learn something and everything, I went to work for my political uncle in a welding shop, and I was learning a trade and stuff. So while I was there, I got my hand caught in a machine. It crushed my finger. I went to the hospital. In the hospital, they operated, but I was there for like a month because the skin graft didn't take.
Right.
So I was good. I was in that room, and they were doing therapy and everything. And at the beginning, there was an elderly man, like in his late 70s, pretty cool old guy, and he would talk to me. And I was coming in and out because I was all drugged up. So I would talk to him. I don't even know what the heck he was saying. I was just answering back. And the guy was pretty cool. So I wake up like half days and I look and he's not there. So I asked one of the nurses when they went to check my vitals. And she goes, "Oh no, we moved into another room." She said, "Henry, you're gonna have the room to yourself for about a week and a half." I said, "Oh crap, okay, cool. I get to play my music." So I put on a radio. I was so happy, my room all to myself, and then they drugged me again. Damn it! And then I wake up half days, and I look, and there was this old guy, and I said, "Oh wow, they brought the old guy back." And the old guy was like pale. I said, "Oh crap, the old man died." And he turned to me and started talking to me. It's like asking me like, "What happened to you?" I go, and my hand was in a cast because I kept on ripping out the tubes. So they cast my butt in a cast and tied me to the side of the bed. So I said, and I went like this. I raised my hand. He goes, "Oh, I hope you feel better." I said, "Okay, cool, thank you." And I kept on looking back because I couldn't really make out the guy. The guy was like, he looked like white American, but you couldn't really see everything. And the guy had like, it looked like a military type shirt. And I said, okay. And then I asked one of the nurses when they came in, I go, who's the old guy? They go, what old guy, Henry? I told you, you're by yourself for a week. I go, the old guy next to the bed. I go, don't be rude. The guy's next to me. They go, Henry, stop being an ass. There's nobody there. And then they pull the curtain real fast. They go, see? I said, oh shit, a ghost.
And then they ask you why you thought that?
Yeah, and I said, yeah. I was talking to him. He go, they were like, they just blew me off. And they go, that's just the drugs. Sit back and enjoy it.
And
I told my mom, because when my mom came to visit, see, my mom was so laid back, she was in a coma. My mom just took her like a stride. When she came to visit me, I go, Mom, there was a dead guy in the bed and a ghost. She goes, what did you do to him? I go, really? She goes, and I told her everything, and she goes, no, it's a ghost. She goes, it's normal. You know that we believe in that. You know that that's normal. You know, just
yeah, but still, it's like...
I go, normal for who? You crazy lady. I go. She goes. Look, you know what? It's still residual energy. What that guy was.
So in other words, he wasn't dressed like in a one of those.
It looked like somebody that came in
hospital guy, right?
They came into a they came there to get work done in the hospital, but had military shirt on. And then I
so he wasn't dressed like a patient then, is what you're saying?
No, he looked like they just dropped him off.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
So then I told her and I described him. He goes, oh, no, he was here last year.
The lady?
Yeah, I told the nurse and I described him like this. I was fixated on that. I wanted to know. I wanted to be like Marvin Gaye. I want to know. And she told me, she goes, no, he was here last year and he passed away.
At the hospital?
Yeah.
There you go. He was still hanging out.
Yeah, when they operated on him, he died in the room.
There you go. And that's he wanted to pay you a visit, Henry. Isn't that sweet?
I know. I'm so wonderful.
Anyway, okay. This next story, this does have so I read, oh, Marlene, you're going into the satanic panic. No, you know what? I said, you know what? People always accuse like, oh, was it satanic panic? And I said, was it just reporters making stuff up back then and exaggerating it? But no, in this case, this next case I'm going to go into, it wasn't like the reporters making stuff up. And no, there was overtones of this. And at the end, you'll ask yourself, really, what was it, what was done? Was it really satanic overtones, or was it just criminal activity, or a mixture of both? All right. And this happened right, I believe it was November of 1971, Michigan. Now, again, the timing on this you're going to see was done again, weirdly around the time before Halloween, Samhain, which is when a lot of these things happen. Now, this is November of 1971. This is in this little town outside of Flint, Michigan, and there's 12 young people, and they're being questioned by police, either as a witness or because they were involved in the torture slaying of a girl named Kathleen Ann Gilbert, who was 17, and she had been a resident of Flint, Michigan. Now, they ranged in age from 14 to 22, and they were believed to be members of a group calling themselves Satanic Servants. Now, at the beginning, the police were trying to dismiss the reports that they were a religious cult. Now, this is the thing. Whether the police don't want to see it as a cult, they consider themselves kind of belonging to this group. Now, a cousin of one of the accused said the group was actually called the Satanical Angels, but that they were a motorcycle club. The main ones accused were Janet Lee Musser, who was 17, and Raymond Humble, 22. He was an unemployed Vietnam vet. They were arraigned in court on a charge of first-degree murder. Now, Humble and another member named William Bowen, who was 17, were arraigned on separate charges of assault with intent to commit murder following a series of sniper attacks on 5 suburban Flint homes the Friday before. Now, the authorities theorized that the attacks were done to intimidate witnesses in the murder of Kathleen Gilbert. In other words, this guy, Humble and Bowen, not only was Humble being looked at because accused of first-degree murder, apparently him and Bowen had gone around shooting up houses, apparently to intimidate people, like, you better not talk about what you saw. So anyway, this girl, Kathleen Gilbert, she was a runaway from her home and from a school called the Girls Training School at Adrian. And she was considered a problem child. And she had run away from her house in March of 1971. And after this, she was placed in this training school, and she ran away from there in July. Now, her father and her stepmother had made a missing persons report for her, but the last they had heard from her was when she ran away in July from that school. Now, she was killed on October 19th. However, her new decomposed body was not discovered until several weeks later in a wooded marsh. The location was near a Flint gang's clubhouse, which is about 10 miles north of Howell. She'd been stabbed twice in the heart, slashed across the throat, and shot with a shotgun. Now, a person who'd witnessed the crime led authorities to the site, which also, this is where maybe you're thinking why these guys were shooting up at the houses, because maybe word had leaked out like, hey, somebody's going to squeal, somebody's going to go to the cops and say about what happened. Now, November the 8th, she was buried, and the autopsy disclosed that her exact cause of death was a stab wound in the chest. All right. Now, Humble and Musser were both held without bond, and the state police were also holding a 16-year-old girl and 3 juvenile boys in connection with the death. It's incredible to think that the majority of there were kids, if you want to call them kids chronologically, were all considered underage. Now, there's a guy named Ralph Burley. He's 29, and he's a cousin of Musser, all right, the girl. And he roomed with Humble, and he told police that he confirmed that they were a motorcycle gang called the Satanical Angels, which is like, were this just the name of a motorcycle gang, or were they practicing Satanists? Now, in a taped statement, Janet Musser to the police, she alleged that Humble shot and then stabbed Kathleen Gilbert, and her statement lasted about 40 minutes, and she said that Humble ordered gang members out of the cabin clubhouse. And supposedly, he did this in revenge against Gilbert because she had given him a venereal disease. And Musser described how 25 guys forced her 16-year-old sister to submit to a gang rape, like either the day before or a few days before. Now, Humble threatened them both, Janet Lee Musser and her sister, not to say anything to their mother about the rape, right? Now, as November keeps progressing after they find her body, the prosecutor, he starts charging everybody with first-degree murder that was somehow involved in some sort of way. Now, one of them, there's always one in that group, his name was Thomas Hammond, and in a deal to get immunity, he testifies that Humble and Musser stripped Gilbert, the girl, in the cabin and tied her up with fishing line, and that he went outside and that he heard a shot fired from inside, right? Now, in other words, he heard it, he didn't see it. Now, he said he and the others were ordered to carry the girl, who was still alive, from the cabin to a marshy area nearby. On the way, Humble stabbed her, and another youth, then unidentified, slashed her throat. Now, remember, the autopsy said that what killed her was when she got stabbed, which is what Humble did. Now, fast forward, it's December 1972, all right, and the judge, the defense, they say, oh, you got to change the venue because this has become like notorious and everybody knows about it. So they give him an okay. They change the venue. Now, there were 3 members of by the way, all these people were part of that, whether it was a motorcycle gang or a group of the Satanical Angels. And in December of 1972, this was the last to be sentenced, was a guy named David Shaw, 19, Donald Bentley, 18, who was sentenced. Now, these guys, it's incredible, were sentenced to 5 years probation in Livingston County, and they had pled guilty to manslaughter. There was another guy named Floyd Rickman, who was 18, who was sentenced to 3 years probation with the first 6 months in jail, and he had gone AWOL from the Army. Now, according to the judge who gave them ordered probation for these three guys, it was because she gave them the benefit of the doubt because they had no previous arrest records. And it's like, come on, probation for manslaughter? And not just manslaughter, the circumstance, that was incredible. But anyway, part of their probation restricted them from mingling with other members of the Satanical Angels, and they had to live at home. One of these guys, Rickman, who was 18, he didn't even have an immediate family. He was just placed in a state educational facility. So Janet Lee Musser, who was 17 when she participated in the murder, she was, believe it or not, at that time already married and had a 20-month-old child. Now, in her defense, her and this other guy were tried jointly. When she tries to plead insanity, it didn't work. And she was sentenced to a life term at Southern Michigan State Prison, and he received the same sentence. Now, later on, Humble argued, this guy argues that the trial court abuses discretion because they allowed a photograph of the victim's body as it was found in swamp to be admitted into evidence and taken to the jury room by the jury during their deliberations. The photograph in question showed the naked torso, arms, and legs of the victim as she lay face down in a swampy area. Nature had mercifully allowed weeds to grow up around the head, thereby cloaking from view the work done by the shotgun blast. While anything but pleasant, the photograph could not be really called ghastly or gruesome. So this girl had survived. She had been shot in the head with a shotgun, and she was still alive. And then, of course, he killed her when he stabbed her. Now, another couple of juveniles, John Reynolds and Vicky Stone, entered pleas of second-degree murder and were placed in a juvenile detention facility. There was another one that it went all the way to the Supreme Court based on having to do to try youth as an adult, because that's one thing from what I read. The prosecution was tried most of them as adults, regardless of their age. Now, the story changed as to the motive for the murder. Another reason that came out supposedly was that it was in retribution, since Gilbert, the girl that got killed, was the one that had lured Janet Musser's sister to the location where she was gang raped by several members the day before she was killed. And before killing her, they had beaten her savagely and urinated. In other words, this thing about the venereal disease, they're saying no, that and it makes you wonder, like, how many of these people were together? Was there more than one gang? It's kind of like a little bit difficult to understand, where apparently Gilbert or Kathleen has lured Janet Musser's sister to the location where she's gang raped by several members the day before. And also they were saying that Gilbert, that she had been beaten savagely and urinated on as well. Now, I don't know if Janet Lee Musser, her boyfriend, was Humble and she complained to him. Who knows really what happened there? Now, Kathleen Gilbert, she was born on July 20th, 1954 to Gordon Gilbert, who died in 2006, and Emma Goodrich, who died in 2003. Now, as of 2022, Ray Leroy Humble is still serving his life sentence. And you probably, if you're looking at the video portion of this, you're going to see that he's still there. In other words, he is still serving a life sentence. The life sentence, he's still alive. He's now the police, they tried to dismiss the report which attached the occult motives for the murder. But at the same time, the true reason for the killing are murky. Was it revenge for venereal disease or for luring Musser's sister to be gang raped? But then it appears that Gilbert was part of this gang or hung out with them. She'd been missing since July of 1971. Was there significance tied to the timing of the murder, which was less than 2 weeks before Halloween? In other words, they're saying, okay, there's no occult reason for this, but then the timing is very close to Halloween, which is known when a lot of some of these people that either call themselves Satanist or they're into occult practices, they do this type of human sacrifice thing. All right, so who knows? What do you think, Henry? Do you think that it was? Do you think it was just she hung out with the wrong people, or
no?
What do you think?
A lot of times when you're that young, you get easily influence. You get like, oh, wide eyed because of the bad boy BS and all that other stuff, and you want to be part of the little group,
Yeah,
and then things go array, and then you wonder why. A lot of times that's what it is.
well, okay, but I can understand that bad boy thing, but we're talking here. Obviously, she had problems. She was running away from home. She's running away. She'd been gone July, August, September, October. She had already run away. She was gone 3 months, and I'm thinking maybe she was hanging out with these people for those 3 months that she disappeared. But one thing is a bad boy, but I mean, one thing is murder. That's.
And also the other part of it is just hanging around with them, not to be in the street, to have somebody that
Of course,
protects them.
sure, protection. Yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah, if you're 17 years old,
It's better than being in a gutter, than who knows what could happen.
yeah, you need somebody to protect your back, even if.
Yeah, even if you're used and abused like a
Yeah, I hate to
like
say
an
it.
old towel.
Yeah. And supposedly the other girl, Janet Lee Musser, the one who was tried with Humble jointly, that she tried to basically plead insanity. They had like a psychiatrist come in and said, hey, that since she was 8 years old, she had mental problems or something. God knows. I really don't know what the background of their lifestyle was as children, but apparently whatever it was, she got life. I don't know what became of her, if she's still alive or died, because this guy, he still, that was in 1972. So we're talking what, 50 years, 82, 92, 2000, no, yeah, 50 years. It'll be 50 years more or less that he was sentenced and that he's serving time, and he's still alive. So there must have been quite a lot of information there as to convince a jury to do that. The part that I couldn't get was that they went ahead and they gave 3 juveniles. But see, and it's really funny because this is the thing about judges. The one judge, which was over the trial of the 2 main ones, Humble and Musser, that they got the life sentences. This was another judge, a lady judge called Judge Pap, and she's the one that put them on probation for 3 years for manslaughter, for being involved just because they didn't have a prior arrest record. I thought that was like, man, you need to do something. I don't know. And again, you never know what happened to these people, what became of them. So there you go. So what happened while you were staying that month at the hospital and you were driving everybody crazy?
I remember another story too.
Go ahead.
It's a gangster story.
Go ahead. Hit it.
It's a ghost gangster story.
Okay.
I lived in the town called Elizabeth, New Jersey. That was Wise Guy Central. A lot of these wise guys owned
You're comfortable. There you go. Okay.
owned like delis and diners and stuff. And I used to do sometimes construction work and make extra money besides welding. And I grew up in that area, so everybody knew me. And sometimes I would make extra money. They would tell me, listen, we're going to do drywall and this and that. You want to come? And most of those guys, they saw us as kids making money. So they were not like you see on TV. They say, okay, we want this, and this done. If we get one done on time, come collect your money. So they would say, we want this whole room done, and that was it. So we started like fixing up the room, and there was one of the guys overseeing everything, and we kept on looking. It's like, okay, you're really up our butt. Why is this guy looking at something? And I asked one of the guy's father that owned it, and he's like, bro, he sees ghosts in here. I go, get the hell out of here. I'm like, okay. See, now you're effing with me. Now you're effing with me.
See, that's exactly what you need to tell a work crew.
Okay. No. It's like, because since my mom was a spiritualist, I really was not afraid of ghosts.
Yeah,
but I thought it was just messing with me, just to mess with me. And then I found out through one of the old guys, it's cool when you talk to old people, real old people, because they don't know how to keep their mouth shut.
Okay, so they
So they go, kid, and we were eating. We were like in our lunch break. We were eating. And he made us a sub. He goes, kid, you want to know what this place was actually used for?
and you're like,
I'm like, oh hell yeah. Oh no. I'll put an extra coat of paint. You tell me. And they go, they used to actually torture and kill people in here.
all right, Henry. Wow.
And they go, this is before where the old owner of this place, they were using this place to act, and that's what they used it for. I go, no effing hell.
But okay.
And he goes, yeah, just keep your mouth shut.
Okay, but whoa. Back up.
They go.
They
go. A lot
what was
of
this?
people,
Just a building or what?
no,
House
it
or
was
what was it?
like a storefront. Like you go to a pizzeria,
Okay.
and the whole back of the building is like, let's say you have a 25,000 square foot place.
Okay.
The whole front has like maybe 5 tables.
Okay.
And a counter, and then the back supposedly was a warehouse, but it was a soundproof room, and they did their business back there. And the thing about it is like with us, it's like, okay, you're cool with us, you pay us, and they pay very well. It's just they wanted you to keep your mouth shut, and they didn't know that the old man told us that. And I started being nosy, and I told my friend Carmine, who was actually back here? He goes, oh, that's my dad. And I was like, okay. And then it was people that owed them money, and they asked and went back and tapped them a little bit here, tapped them a little bit there, and they didn't pay up. So then they were turned into roadkill. And the reminiscence of that was still in that room. And he goes, you guys better do a good job, because the last people, they put like 10 coats of paint in here, and he still sees them.
So no, okay.
And I go, so what did you put here? He goes, you're gonna laugh. You're gonna laugh. They were over here about to play cards, and the guy went to get a beer, and there was somebody in the back room by the fridge looking at him.
Okay, I'm sure that must have done. See that?
And he threw up his beer and left, and he hasn't come back.
I wonder why.
Yeah.
This pretty soon this is gonna come off. This is giving me a headache.
So yeah.
See, that happens. People, sometimes it's like, but see.
So I told him what he needed to do was it says the majority of, I think just like Spanish people or Cuban people, or even American people, they're very religious, and they went and had a priest bless that thing and do everything else,
and that did the trick.
And we got paid. That's all that matters.
That's all that mattered. Okay. All right. The next story. This one definitely. This I brought it home to Florida. All right. This was from Florida, and this definitely it was. As a matter of fact, not too far from where I'm at now, which is Daytona. And this definitely, and again, there's no doubt whatsoever that this had some really, it had some very dark. Besides the act that there was an actual murder, definitely there was an occult aspect to it besides the criminal activity. All right. And this, of course, we're going to fast forward. This is May 3rd, 1973 in Daytona. Again, this is a very significant holiday. And I mentioned earlier when I said that thing about the Druids, May 1st for a lot of Satanists, Beltane it's also a significant date as far as on the occult calendar. And when it starts out, there's a kid, a boy. His name is Ross Michael Cochran. He's 17, and he's a change boy in a pinball arcade. And turns out he was strapped to a table and tortured for a day before being murdered by a group of young Satan worshipers. They sacrificed him. Now, at that point, the police charged 6 young beach transients who were members of a devil's coven with first-degree murder. Okay? Now, Cochran, now this is the part where you say, what's the real motive? This kid, this Ross Cochran, 2 months before he gets killed, he was a major state witness in a suit to close a nearby private school as a place of lewdness. Now, this occurred in March, and the state attorney filed suit asking that the 78 pupils there should be declared wards of the court. Now, what happened was, back in March, 2 months before, the police, they raided this school at 1 a.m., all right? And apparently, prior to the raid, there had been culmination of months of secret investigations headed by the state attorney, the chief investigator for the state attorney. And they went in there with a search warrant that charging that the school with offenses of false imprisonment, child abuse, lewd and lascivious behavior, and the dispensing of illegal drugs. This was among some other things. Now, this search warrant, this place was huge. It covered 44 acres of what was called Green Valley School. Now, the entire campus was 164, but the warrant covered 44 acres on the main campus and another 20 acres of land owned by the school at a marina and the land. Now, the marina and the land was privately owned, and they also searched a 100-foot school-owned government surplus boat. Now, the school was founded by a guy named Reverend George von Hilsheimer, and the students that went there were described as having emotional, social, or mental behavior problems. In other words, these were troubled kids. And the dean there was a guy named Chandler Nowicki. He was the academic dean. Now, what was found in the raid was described as a large quantity of unknown drugs. They got 3 movie reels. One was classified by the state attorney as, quote, colored Danish sex film. I guess in color, I'm not sure. A number of publications classified as a sex or adult magazine, a water pipe, and 10 slide projectors and carousels were taken. They also found torture devices removed from the school that included 1 set of leg irons, a sex electric dog collars, 1 pair of handcuffs, and an old fishing light with a bulb missing that was said to be called by the students the bull shocker. In other words, they were using this, like, I don't know, as an enforcement or what. Now, at that time, they made 4 arrests. They arrested the Nowicki, the headmaster, on a felony of unlawfully imprisoning a child, and 3 temporary staff members who were charged with marijuana possession. Now, it almost sounds like what they went in there more was to collect evidence of what they, what the allegations were. Now, remember, right after that, on April 27th, okay, one of the state's chief witness was this kid, Ross Cochran, who was once a student there. That's how he knew so much. And that night, when they do the raid, they remove him from the school for his own safety. And later on, you're going to find that kind of this was a problem, because when they took him out of that school, all right, and because for his own safety, instead of taking him, for lack of a better word, into protective custody, they left him on the street. That's why he was working in an arcade as a change boy. All right. You're thinking, why didn't they take this kid? And obviously, everybody that went there, all the teenagers that were there, had problems, either emotional problems, behavior, mental illness, you name it. But they know. So here he is. He's working in the arcade. And back in July 1972, okay, this is after Cochran, the kid, is killed. The magazine The Floridian writes a piece about the school describing that Green Valley takes supposedly incorrigible problem youngsters and treats them with unorthodox methods, such as strict punishments, massive vitamin doses, and no psychotherapy. Criticism of the school is intense, but the outspoken director says his controversial treatment have a success rate of 86%. Now, there were allegations against the school, which was said to condone sexual relations between the students, that required the girls to take birth control pills, that allowed the boys and girls to swim together in the nude, and they placed pornographic literature in the school's library. Sound familiar? Anyway, this back in 1972, 70, this school had a budget of 1.3 million. In other words, dollars. It wasn't cheap for these kids to go there. It had been established in 1964 and was operated by a religious society identified as Humanitas. And it was on the site of an old monastery, all right, in Orange City, which is in Volusia County. Now, a legislative group had investigated this facility in 1969 and had been a source of controversy for several years. Now, the police chief at the time said they must have hated this kid. He's talking about Cochran. They must have hated this kid like hell because they really tortured him. He said that Cochran had been flogged with chains and stabbed with cut glass while tied to a black wooden table in the basement altar room of a ramshackle brick rooming house called the Roach Haven by these beach kids. This place was located at 27 North Grandview Avenue. Now, his mangled body, tied up with ropes, was found in a remote wooded area about 50 miles southwest of Daytona Beach. Now, the police initially were uncertain if he was killed during the alleged sacrifice or if he died where his body was found. The 6 that were initially charged with the murders were Kenneth Francis, 17. Another one was 21, John Colbert, 18. Another girl named Deborah Ann Shook, 22. Another late girl, Cindy Black, 17. And another one, 19, from Detroit. Most of them, believe it or not, none of them were really originally from Florida. They were all transients, and they were all hanging out and living there. The only ones that had attended this Green Valley school had been Cochran, who was killed, and the one guy, Kenneth M. Francis, who was 17. Now, according to the police, Cochran had been running his mouth around the beach saying he was a narcotics agent, and it was speculated that he may have angered the Satan worshipers. But then I'm thinking to myself, later on when it comes out that him and Kenneth Francis were in the same school, he would have known that they're both 17 years old, that they're not narcotics agent, but that Cochran squealed and turned in the school. But still, as far as him being a narcotics agent, nah. Now, the police believe that Cochran was lured to the rooming house. He was overpowered. They tied him up in a second-floor room and then beat him for nearly 5 hours. The police described that they went to the altar room at about 3 p.m., put him on the table as a sacrifice. They tortured him some more. He pleaded for his life, and that the altar was an old work table painted black and lined with black painted bottles and candles. Motorcycle chains and symbols in red paint adorned the walls of the room. In other words, whether they considered themselves and acted like Satanists. There was a guy named Nicholas Frazzi. He was from Ohio. And he said that the initiates to the coven were asked, quote, to denounce God and everything he stood for. And he said that he and Deborah Shook slashed their stomachs in their wedding ceremony in the basement altar room. He displayed a jagged scar to a newsman, and his wife was known to the coven as Ledora. And the one that they had a satanic priest who was the one that presided over the ceremony. And this guy, he tells the police, anyone who wanted to join the coven had to sign their names in a register in blood and were asked to denounce God and everything that he stood for. Now, he said he had heard that someone was being held captive in the basement, but he said he knew nothing about the murder. And again, the police captain, he said that all these youths that were running out, they were all transients. They didn't belong to the area. Now, in October of 1973, all right, it's reported that, I guess as more information is being dug up about all these people and what they were doing, one of them, Deborah Shook, said she was a priestess of a satanic cult and testified that Cochran was sacrificed to appease the master Satan, that she had wiped up the blood after Cochran was taken away, And she testified that one of the other ones, last name of Hester, told her that they had blessed a satanic knife to slit Cochran's throat. In other words, there was whether I don't know whether they really thought this guy was a big mouth, was a narcotics agent. They took certain steps to kill him in a sacrificial way, in a ritual way. Now it was determined that Cochran was killed by a blow from a club after being tied up to the table, right? And the police, the way they found out about this was that a youth was arrested on an auto brake charge, and he, I guess to get out of getting in trouble, he tells the police about the murder. They never clarified, did he hear about it secondhand or did he witness it? But that's how the police find out about it. Now, they say that he was taken in a car trunk and taken to these woods near Satsuma. And again, they don't know if he was dead when he was transported. Now, his body was found about 100 yards off State Road 415 South. And when they found him, he was still tied up, and a pine log was found by his head, which was the one possibly used to kill him, because what really killed him was massive skull fractures. Now, the murder was carried out close to May 1st, known in pagan groups as Beltane, and an important date to Satanists. In October of 1973, David Hester, the self-proclaimed high priest of the Satan-worshipping group, was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Hester, who was 17, had pled innocent to the charges. 5 other members of the Devil's Children, which is what they called themselves, were charged, and he was the first to be convicted. The others agreed to produce evidence for the state and pled guilty to lesser charges. Now, Hester, who was pronounced sane by a psychiatrist, said he only pretended to club Cochran with a pine log, but that another cult member, Kenneth Francis, actually hit the youth over the head 4 or 5 times. In May of 1973, this George von Hilsheimer, who was the one that established that school, he was a controversial Protestant lay minister, and he held a press conference to explain that he believed it was doubtful that this guy Francis had any connection with a cult. And this is what he said: "It's our belief that this boy could have had only the most casual acquaintance with such people. For nearly 2 months before this tragedy, Kenneth Francis had been in New Mexico on a Green Valley field trip. Supposedly, Francis had returned a few days before the murder and was officially listed as a Green Valley runaway." This guy, George Van Hilsheimer, he died in 2013. And fast forward, Kenneth Francis, who was apparently, he went to jail for life. He died in 2003 in jail here in Florida. I don't know what happened to Hester. Right now, on a side note, which this is incredible, because this guy George von Hilsheimer, back in 1963, let's go back. This is 10 years before this murder takes place. He's tied to another location that's about an hour's drive from Asheville, North Carolina. It's a remote place called Camp Summerlane. And there's a cub reporter who goes out on a tip that something was going to take place at this location. So he started interviewing these people who live in this little town. And they're telling him that first they see this summer camp like rather ordinary, rustic. But as time goes by, they start realizing that things are not really like what they appear. Right? They're realizing that, in other words, that there's more to this than meets the eye. So much so that they start basically getting concerned. And they said that they're telling this reporter that there were reports of nudity, free love, and open sexuality became rampant, and that the citizens of Rossman, this is a little town, didn't want any of it. And they asked police to escort the staff and about 50 students out of the place. Hundreds of locals amassed to witness the exit. Now, a police captain who came over to tell these people, you got to go, leave and escort them out, said that the place was filthy, that the campers, as in the students, had established their own type of recreation, and they did what they wanted to do. And he said that the people there were dirty as well. Now, this is 63. This is I want to say before that commune stuff started taking off. Now, later on, in 2008, they interviewed somebody because a lot of people there were denying it, that this wasn't true. In 2008, they interviewed somebody who was there in 63. This guy now is in his 70s. And this is what he was saying, that those people were a nudist camp. They went swimming naked and all that stuff right on the side of the road where one of the camp's lakes was located. In other words, this is how the townspeople became aware of it. This was the reason the mountain town wanted them out of there. Summerlin, after moving to New Jersey, lost most of its campers. After this is when von Hilsheimer founded the Green Valley School in Orange County, Florida, which operated from 1965 to 1973. In other words, what drove von Hilsheimer, God, I gotta get this thing off my head. That's it. Enough of this. I'm getting a headache.
You want to wear my hat?
Here, let me have your hat.
You want to wear my hat?
Here. I don't know. I'll wear your hat. Okay, there we go.
You got it backwards.
I got it on backwards. There you go. Okay.
Oh, here you go.
Okay, whatever. Here we go. The Rocky hat. So anyway, here, this is what leads this guy, Van Schelmer, to he ends up in Florida because it appears that this little town, these people in the Carolinas, they're having none of this free love, free nudity. That's why I find, and what does he do? He starts a school which ends up with the same type of allegations, because at the beginning, when I was reading this, I'm thinking, well, was this maybe misinterpreted somehow as far as, what was happening? Did they just totally misunderstand? But no, there was something definitely going on especially when you see that Camp Summerlin and the Carolinas, and then he comes here, and the school already had been investigated prior to that, and I'm still trying to look up where. I mean, the school is there, but that they were saying there was an old monastery there. I'm still trying to find out what that is, because I think there is. If you go to Orange City and Volusia County, there is a place called Monastery Road, and a lot of roads and places, they get named after what's there. So I'm gonna find out what that's about. So, pump. You're on. Got any more ghost stories?
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear it.
Okay. Before I was asked to leave the hospital.
Did they throw a party when they saw you leave?
By popular demand.
Did they say, oh my God, he's leaving, thank God?
Hey, look, I don't care. I had a good time.
But they didn't know where to kiss him or kill him.
Oh, no. I used to play poker with the staff.
Okay.
They used to sneak in through the back door at night and bring pizza and we played. I took a lot of their money. But you know what? I was actually treated very nicely and they were very understanding that I was 15 years old, and at 15 years old, you don't want to get strapped to a bed. The thing about it is, what got me strapped to the bed so I couldn't move is because, the skin graft wouldn't take on my finger, so they had to put stuff, IVs and stuff, and I was ripping them out.
Okay.
So they actually cast my arm and tied me like this to the side of the bed, so I couldn't move.
They must have been pulling out their hair with you.
Once they actually saw that it was taking off, they let me free. Shouldn't have, but they let me free, and I started wandering around. And I used to come visit them at the nursing station, and I started being curious, checking out people's rooms, and looking at them, and they would tell me to get the F out, and I would step on their weights and yank their cast.
They must have loved you.
But I found something that was very interesting.
Were you like a candy striper?
Oh no, candy strippers loved me.
I bet.
I was cute. Okay, shut up. Not now, but I was cute.
All right.
Okay, all right. I'm 60. All right, shut up. I never seen what a mortuary looked like. So they had a door at the back end of the nursing station that said morgue.
Okay.
I'm 15 years old. I didn't know what the hell that was.
All right.
So I was nosy as SH. And there was a nurse there who looked the mirror image of Pam Grier.
Okay.
So I started calling her Pam, and she started flipping me off. So I said, "What is that?" She was, "Dead people. You want to be part of them?"
All right.
So I said, "Really?" She goes, "Don't go down there." So I waited. I stuck around there, checked out their computers, and when Pam left, they were on a skeleton crew after 9 o'clock at night.
Okay.
They only had 2 people because everybody supposedly went to sleep except Henry. So the only was this guy. Can't make this up. That guy's name was freaking Bob. He looked like a Bob. So he would just stay there doing payroll and paperwork. So I go, "Bob, I'm taking a walk." I go, "Ahead, Henry, just be careful." So I went like this, looked back, waited until his head went down. I opened up that door and I bolted to that door. It was dark as freaking hell. And I started looking, nobody around there.
Okay.
And I walked into this room. They said the fridge. So I walked in there, and they had a body on the slab. I screamed so freaking loud that I thought I actually went through the door.
So
I didn't realize.
did you understand then what a morgue was?
Mm-hmm. But when I was walking by, I started looking at things. There was supposed to be an empty area, an empty room, but I saw a couple of people walking by there.
What?
I saw a couple of people walking by there, and they were in gowns, and a couple of them had bullet holes in them. A couple of them were like they had the stitches down the front of their shirt,
like an autopsy.
Yeah, and they were walking down the hallway with this blank look in their face, and I'm like, I looked at her, then I realized what it was. I was like, "Oh shit!" again, and I ran out, went through the door, went back to my room.
Let me ask you the thing. Is this hospital still open? Where was it? In Elizabeth?
It was called Alexian Brothers.
Oh, so it was a Catholic hospital.
Mm-hmm. It was called Alexian Brothers.
You know what that means, right? You know what the tie is to the Alexian Brothers. You know that the Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis is where they had the exorcism for supposedly John Doe.
But guess what? One of the biggest reasons, wait for it, one of the biggest reasons where I think they closed down because they were not able to get bought out because they were making a lot of very colorful mistakes. Like, see this? Colorful. It was supposed to have been a skin graft. They sewed it up.
Okay.
And they got gangrene within a week.
Well, that happens. But anyway.
So they a lot of people were having similar stuff happen to them.
Like things that shouldn't be happening were happening?
No, but because the thing about it is they were getting in trouble for incompetence.
Okay, so but coming back to because the Alexian Brothers, believe it or not, a lot of these religious orders when they were coming into the United States and in different cities, usually what they would set up would be hospitals and teaching institutions, hospitals. That's why you had a lot of the nuns or priests, they would either they would either teach or the hospitals. And the one in St. Louis, which is where they did supposedly the exorcism on the Roland Doe or John Doe, which was the one that The Exorcist was based on. They ran a story in 1949. Supposedly this article was the one that William Peter Blatty based the Exorcist on when he wrote the book, which of course it would change to the girl and everything. Now, the Alexian Brothers, what people don't realize is that hospital where they kept this guy, the kid, while they were doing the exorcism, was an insane asylum at one time. Part of the services they provided was as an insane asylum. So the Alexian Brothers were known. Now, I don't know if that individual hospital, but is it still open or is it closed?
Well, I used to drive by there periodically because it was a shortcut to my mom's house. Okay. So I looked and it was starting getting very decrepit.
Was it an old building then?
Supposedly, it was relatively new, but they were competing with the Elizabeth General Hospital that was across the way, literally across the way.
Right.
And
No, the reason why I
and
asked,
they were like very like high tech, modern. Well, to that time, it was very modern, and they had, I mean, state of the art stuff, and Alexian Brothers, their emergency room was very like filthy by today's standards, filthy.
okay, so no, my point that I'm asking is that if this was an old hospital, maybe that there was a reason why you were seeing all these things walking around.
Yeah,
Because there
yeah.
was,
I never thought of it that way, but yeah. I mean, like, and it's a shame because the staff was very nice. The staff was,
oh, yeah, but
you know, and they went out of their way to like, you know.
did they ever see anything like that? They had seen something. Was you hear
You
a
know
lot
what?
of these
You know
stories
what?
about hospital staff seeing stuff.
When you're 15, you don't ask that.
Well, I know that, but
You know, I mean, now I would have probably said, "Huh?" No, but it was pretty. It was
Yeah.
It was fun.
that's the thing that
I had a ball in that hospital.
well, what can I say? But anyway, all right, guys. By the way, I put. We're about to end because we're going out a little bit hour and 90 minutes. But I let my hair loose because I'm going to be doing probably in a month, about another month. Okay, another video like I did last year about New Year's resolution because people asked me about it, but I did it back then on New Year's. And I had told everybody that my New Year's resolution was not to cut my hair for a year. And I haven't. I've let my hair grow off for 1 year. I've kept my resolution. All right. I'm going to go in December and I'm going to get cut because I said not cut short, but and I want to do a special video just on New Year's resolution, preparing for what your New Year's resolution should be. And of course, I want to introduce the subject of hypnosis and, why we make, what kind of, how can I say, how do you work it up here in your mind for your New Year's resolution to not fall into the trap of crashing and burning, which is what happens to a lot of people, myself included. But I want to do it early. I want to do it in December so people can really figure out what it is that they want their resolutions to be and to make plans is like how I'm going to get my subconscious not to have me crash and burn. So yeah, that's why I let my hair out loose. And it's like, and I have to keep it tied down because there's nothing like not having cut your hair for a year. He hears me complain about it every day. So anyway, guys, it has been absolutely wonderful. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
And, we'll be back. Like I said, I'm going to do the one for the New Year's. Let's see what we come up with. And don't forget to sign up to my Substack newsletter because on there I announce like the new books. I have done giveaways on Amazon for the books for like 5 days. Any new projects, any new books, any new anything. All right. So please go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com or MPPellicer.com and you're going to find links to the Substack newsletter or just about anything. I publish everything on there as well as links to the podcast, everything, and the videos, you name it. So until next time, you guys, take care and happy holidays, even though I'm hoping you're going to come back before then. Say bye, Henry.
Bye-bye.